Bonjour, bienvenue à cette conférence de
Hello
presse.
and welcome to this press
My name is
conference. I'm
your
Guillaume Saint-Pierre.
moderator. With us today in person, we have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Anita Anand, Minister of National Defence, Dominique Leblanc, Ministre des Affaires intergouvernementales,
Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs, and Diane Leboutillier, Minister for National Revenue.
Via Zoom, Sean Fraser, Minister of Immigration, and Goody Hutchins, Minister of Rural Economic Development. So we will start with comments from Prime Minister Trudeau, Madame Anand, and also Madame Hutchins via Zoom, and then we will take 20 minutes. We'll have 20 minutes for questions. Monsieur Trudeau, allez-y.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone.
Ministers Anand, Leblanc, Leboutillier, Hutchins, and Fraser. We're here to provide an update on what we are doing to support people and provincial governments in the wake of Hurricane Fiona. As you know, the storm has passed, but thousands of homes are still experiencing power outages, and the scale of the damage means that people are still facing a tough time. Many parts of Nova Scotia and PEI, as well as southwestern Newfoundland, continue to experience the effects and damage left by the winds and coastal flooding. There's
also damage, flooding, and strong winds in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, including at the Île de la Madeleine and in eastern New Brunswick. There will be a lot of work ahead in the coming days and months to clean up and rebuild, but I know that Canadians will be there for each other as always.
I want to offer my condolences to the loved ones of the woman who lost her life in Port au Basque and to the loved ones of the person who passed away in Prince Edward Island. Canadians are thinking of you in these difficult times. Our thoughts are also with people who've lost homes or businesses, people who've been evacuated and aren't sure when they're going to be able to get home, people who are having difficulty accessing services and support due to road washouts and debris, and people with young kids who won't be going to school today. I want, of course, to thank first responders for their incredible work this weekend and the work they continue to do, as well as thanking Atlantic Canadians who, as always, are being good neighbours to one another, looking out for each other, because that's what Atlantic Canadians do. That's what all Canadians do. C'est traumatisant.
It's traumatizing to see your home destroyed or to have to be evacuated in an emergency. It's very hard. I can tell you everyone on the ground is working hard to help affected communities. Yesterday, again, we got together with the Emergency Incident Response Group. Ministers and other senior officials are working closely with their provincial counterparts and First Nations. I also spoke with the Mayor of Charlottetown, Port au Basque, and the regional municipality of Cape Breton. I also, of course, spoke with our local MPs who are there on the ground with their constituents.
Approved requests for federal assistance from provinces. In Nova Scotia, the Canadian Armed Forces are available to clear road links and to restore electricity. On PEI, some smaller communities are isolated and tens of thousands remain without power. The Canadian Armed Forces have arrived to help remove debris from roadways and assist in the restoration of the power grid. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the federal government is helping by providing detailed aerial imagery and mapping of damages. We're also deploying military personnel to support local authorities on the ground, and naval vessels and aircraft are also on high readiness to assist if necessary. The one thing that's been consistent in my calls to premiers, mayors, and MPs is that Canadians are stepping up for each other and helping their communities get through this tough time. I will be visiting the affected regions as soon as possible this week, and I want all people in the Atlantic provinces and Eastern Quebec to know that we are here for you. Justement cet été,
in fact, this summer, I had the opportunity to travel through Atlantic Canada to speak with people and hear about the issues they care about, and especially I went to the Île de la Madeleine a month ago. It's a beautiful place. The people who live there are very welcoming. They are always there for each other, and I know they're used to storms, but this one was on a different scale, and we will keep on being there to support them as we will support everyone in that area. I can tell you that we will keep on being there, not just in the days to come, but in the weeks, months, and if need be, in the years to come as well. As we announced on Saturday, those who want to help can go to the Canadian Red Cross website to make a donation, and our government is going to match donations made over the next 30 days.
Donate on the Canadian Red Cross website, and our government will match your donations over the next 30 days. I know Canadians are watching with consternation, either the images that they've seen or, like so many Canadians, having friends and family members in Atlantic Canada that we've been worried about. It's an opportunity to step up and give what we can to support people on the ground. Like I said, the government will match those donations to the Red Cross. En terminant aujourd'hui,
in conclusion today, I'd like to talk about the situation in Iran. Unfortunately, Iran does not respect human rights, and that's nothing new.
The Iranian regime refused to be held accountable, but our government was and is relentless in the pursuit of justice for the families of the victims. We will stop at nothing to ensure that this regime is held to account and that we will support the families until justice is served. We've seen Iran disregarding human rights time and time again, and now we see it with the death of Mahsa Amini and the crackdown on protests. To the women in Iran who are protesting and to those who are supporting you, we stand with you. We join our voices, the voices of all Canadians, to the millions of people around the world demanding that the Iranian government listen to their people, end their repression of freedoms and rights, and let women and all Iranians live their lives and express themselves peacefully. Today, I'm announcing that we will implement sanctions on dozens of individuals and entities, including Iran's so-called morality police. This is in addition to some of the toughest measures of any country towards Iran.
Today, I am announcing that we are going to impose sanctions on dozens of individuals and organizations, including on the so-called morality police in Iran, to the women who are demonstrating, and to those who support them. We are there for you and with you.
Thank you. I'm now happy to pass it over to Minister Anand.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Alors, que nous continuons
As we are still witnessing the devastating effects of Hurricane Fiona, I would like to reiterate my sympathy for our friends in Atlantic Canada and Eastern Quebec. I know that there are many Canadians who are watching us from home, and they want to know what we are doing to help the people in Atlantic Canada, and I want to reassure you that the Canadian Armed Forces are meeting the challenge, and they are helping everywhere where they are needed.
In response to the devastating impacts of Hurricane Fiona, Joint Task Force Atlantic, 5th Canadian Division, Canadian Rangers, local reserve units, Royal Canadian Air Force aircraft and crew, and Royal Canadian Navy ships, small vessels and crew in the region are all on standby and helping wherever needed. In Nova Scotia and in Cape Breton in particular, yesterday morning, a Canadian Army reconnaissance team was on the ground, evaluating the damage of Hurricane Fiona and identifying what military capabilities would best assist. Our Canadian Armed Forces will provide equipment and personnel to help with reestablishing electricity, roads, and bridges if required by the province, and approximately 100 Canadian Armed Forces personnel are available to assist the province if required, with 100 personnel available per province to assist in PEI and Newfoundland as well. And today I am confirming that lead Canadian Armed Forces elements are ready to begin tasks and that Canadian Armed Forces presence in communities in Nova Scotia will be visible this morning. Turning to PEI, in PEI, following our receipt and acceptance of the province's request for assistance, Canadian Armed Forces are deploying immediately to help with removing vegetation and debris from roadways, to help restore the power grid, and with repairing roadways as required. As of now, over 100 CAF personnel are in the province. These Canadian Armed Forces personnel arrived overnight. Lead CAF elements are in PEI, ready to work with the provincial authorities today, and CAF presence will be visible in PEI this morning. Now turning to Newfoundland and Labrador, in response to Newfoundland's request for assistance yesterday, our Canadian Armed Forces are activating resources and personnel to provide physical impact assessments and immediate on-the-ground support to local authorities to ensure the well-being and safety of residents in the province. In particular, HMCS Margaret Brooke is sailing from St. John's this morning to conduct wellness checks in 4 communities on the South Coast tomorrow, as requested by the province. La présence du navire Margaret Brooke
The presence of HMCS Margaret Brooke is there to work with provincial and regional authorities and with military leadership, even though it arrives after a long deployment in the Arctic. After Operation Anouk, Margaret Brooke is willing and able to help Canadians in need.
Armed Forces elements in Newfoundland are ready to begin their tasks, and that CAF presence will be visible throughout the region on the west coast this morning. Turning now to Quebec and New Brunswick, et au Québec, en particulier
in Quebec, in particular, on the Magdalen Islands, Canadian Rangers are continuing to provide us with up-to-date information, so we remain on standby to help the province if we are asked for help.
This remains an all-hands-on-deck effort. Today, tomorrow, and every day, our Canadian Armed Forces stand ready to support Canadians in times of need. Aujourd'hui, demain et chaque jour.
Today, tomorrow, and every day, our Canadian Armed Forces are there to help Canadians when Canadians need their help.
Merci, Miigwech. I will now pass it to Minister Hutchins.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. First of all, I'd like to pass along my condolences again to the family of the woman whose body was found yesterday here in Port aux Basques. Prime Minister, pictures do not portray the utter devastation in this area. I met with the mayor last night. I've been on the ground this morning, and it is heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching. The last count from the town this morning is there are 76 homes destroyed or structurally damaged. That's 76 people without a place to live. The good news is the mayor and his council, the volunteers in this area are incredible. The Red Cross, the Lions Club, the Salvation Army, everybody is coming together to look after these folks in need. I've done some posts on social media where folks can actually give locally as well. This community has come together to help their friends. I'm going to go out later this afternoon to areas nearby here, Fox Truce, Marguerite, Burnt Islands, and then later in the week I want to go to Burgeo and Ramia because they too on the South Coast have seen devastation. And I'm sure Anita, when the HMCS Margaret Brooke gets here, she will see firsthand. I still want to say to people on the ground, please listen to authorities. There is a plan being put in place that you can return to your home to gather safely some personal items. But please wait until the town and the officials have the plan put in place. Many of these buildings are not structurally sound. I saw that firsthand this morning, and I know it's tearing your heart out that you can't go and retrieve some things. But please wait until the town has it in place. We need to know that your home is structurally safe before you can go access it. They have a plan to help you get your vehicles, get some personal items. here in Western Newfoundland and all Eastern Canada as we get through this, the short term, the long term, and the very long term. It will be a long time before this area gets back on its feet. Everywhere I've gone since I've been here, people have said, I've lived here all my life. One gentleman said, I've lived here 83 years. I have never seen a storm like this. The areas where the storm surge literally came over and hit these homes, people have never seen before. Prime Minister, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are resilient people, but I can tell you this has tested each and every one of us. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, friends, and stay safe.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Ministers. We will now go to questions. We have 20 minutes. One question, one follow-up, as usual. We'll start with Libertion, Canadian Press.
The federal government pledged to make improvements after cell phone service went dead across Atlantic Canada during Dorian in 2019, and yet it happened again. What is your government going to do about this problem?
That this began, we were working, even the warnings came, we were working with telco providers to ensure that cell phone coverage would remain as best as possibly could. Providers were working together to make sure that if one area went down, others would be there. It has been a very, very difficult storm that exceeded even the dire predictions that people had. But at the same time, everyone is working very, very quickly to get things back to normal as quickly as possible. And of course, there are always lessons to learn. We have learned lessons since Dorian and implemented them. There will be more to learn on how we keep people protected, given that extreme weather events are going to get, unfortunately, more likely in the coming years.
And given the level of devastation, is 100 soldiers enough per province? And why are you not deploying MV Asterix as well?
We will always respond to any requests that the provinces put forward. We know that provinces themselves have lots of personnel on the ground and lots of personnel deploying. The military is there to assist in whatever capacity is needed. If they need more, we'll send more. There's no question about it. Anita, if you want to speak to that.
Thanks so much, Lee. As the Prime Minister said, approximately 100 soldiers per province, that's 3 platoons or so, have been allocated, but we have multiple additional resources and assets at the ready to deploy if and when called upon. I will say that the Canadian Armed Forces are working very tightly in conjunction with each provincial authority in the respective province, and task allocation is occurring on that basis. So as the hours and days progress, if more soldiers are needed, more will be deployed. And that is well known to the provincial authorities with whom we are in very close contact. Thank you. At the current time, frigates themselves have not been requested by the provinces. We are deploying the HMCS Margaret Brooke, simply because we believe that Port aux Basques and the West Coast could use additional resources of that nature, and we want to be ready in case we're called upon. In addition, Newfoundland and Labrador have particularly asked for wellness checks of citizens. As Minister Hutchins described, the province has been hit particularly hard, and these wellness checks will be conducted in part by the Canadian Armed Forces, some of whom will be on HMCS Margaret Brooke, and that frigate will arrive at port tomorrow.
Judy Trim, CTV.
I'd like to know, earlier this summer, the federal government had put in place the Climate Resilience Funding Program. It would appear after an event like this that that is clearly not enough. My first question is in regards to families. What will the federal government be offering any aid specifically geared towards families and individuals affected by this storm? And secondly, will you expand that climate resilience program?
First of all, we're very much focused right now on just getting through these initial days of chaos, of disruption, of people worried about where they're going to sleep, worried about how they're going to get through the next couple of days, get the power back on. That is our entire focus right now. But as I've said to the premiers, as I've said to the mayors I've spoken with, the federal government will be there as a partner. We know that the disaster response program by the federal government is there to support with these costs, but as we look to rebuilding, as we look to building stronger infrastructure, as we look to helping families that may have had no or only partial insurance, governments of all stripes are going to be stepping up, and the federal government will be there alongside them.
Do you have a follow-up?
I do. In regards to the wellness checks, can you explain a little more, Minister Anand, perhaps how it will look like? Will you have military doctors going off-site to check on residents? Also, will you be offering supplies? Are you bringing supplies of water, food? What is it going to look like?
Okay, thank you. So the aid that we are offering is spelled out and requested in particular in the request for assistance that the province provides to us. And in terms of the wellness checks, they are primarily safety checks just to make sure that individuals within particular homes and apartment buildings are okay. So at this point, these are not medical personnel that are being deployed to conduct these wellness checks. However, as I have said, should the request come in for additional resources, we will, of course, respond. This is a top priority for the Canadian Armed Forces at the current time, as you can see by the commitment of human resources and equipment and military assets that are at the ready to respond if and when called upon. Thank you.
Judy, if I may, it's Minister Hutchings here. These small communities that the HMCS Margaret Brooke will be going into are communities of a couple of hundred people. The locals on the ground are helping and they have some assistance, but there's just not enough bodies to get out to these tiny rural communities, and I know they'll be delighted to see this vessel pull into port and help them assess and figure out what the damages are done in these rural communities.
Mélanie Marquis, La Presse.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Mr. Trudeau, since you are at the podium, I'll begin with you. But my next question is for Ms. Anand. The Conservative Party for several years now has been asking you to designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. Are you considering this? And if not, why not? Canada has already one of the strongest sanctions regimes in the world, and we're always going to be there to do more. We know the extent to which Iran's government is violating human rights. It's not protecting its own citizens. In fact, it's creating instability around the world, and that's why we are always considering doing more. We have sanctioned some individuals, members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, and we are going to keep on considering anything else we can do with regard to sanctions. And again, this would include several members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Some of these members will indeed be sanctioned. Ms. Anand, and perhaps also Ms. Le Boutillier, since you are the member for Gaspésie-Île-de-la-Madeleine. Ms. Anand, you said the Rangers are assessing the situation and they will step in if necessary. What are you expecting from them? Do you think that they might need to be called in? And Ms. Le Boutillier, Do you believe that the armed forces should help on the Magdalen Islands? Thank you for the question. Our rangers are our eyes on the ground, and they are present in every province, and they are there to let us know what the people on the ground need. As it now stands, however, they have not told us it is necessary to be there, but we're still in touch with them, and we are also in touch with provincial governments. So at this point here, we have not received a request for aid, but we are on standby. We are ready to be there for every province if need be. The Canadian Armed Forces are very serious about the issue of national assistance, and that is why the HMCS Margaret Brooke has been deployed. It wasn't originally the plan to send this vessel to Newfoundland, but it is important for us to be there if we can be there. So we will be there for Newfoundland, for Quebec, for Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. And I am very pleased with the effort made by the armed forces, and I would like to thank every member of the Canadian Armed Forces for their dedicated efforts. Thank you. I would like to complete that by saying that this morning I spoke with various partners on the Île de la Madeleine. The people living on those islands are thinking of everyone living in the Atlantic provinces. Crisis cells were put together on the Madeleine Islands, and for now we do not need any additional help. Dealing with the current situation for them. This morning, the priority is to get the fishing boats out, fishing vessels out to make sure they're protected.
BC.
Hello, Prime Minister. I've been asked to ask you a couple of questions on some other topics, so I hope you can indulge me on that. On the lifting of all the travel restrictions today, are you in fact sending the same message President Biden sent, that the pandemic is over and it's time to move past restrictions permanently, or is it possible we could have a snapback if we have one of those fall surges we often get after the optimistic summers?
I think anyone who thinks that the pandemic is over should visit our hospitals right now, where we still see the impact of people struggling with COVID-19. And we see our frontline health workers exhausted and continuing to step up every single day. Every step of the way, we have taken decisions based on the best recommendations of experts, scientists, of doctors, and the recommendation was that the border measures are no longer necessary right now. The focus that we have to have is indeed knowing that as the winter comes and people get back inside, people need to get update in their boosters. We need to make sure that people are getting their flu shots. People need to get the updated COVID shots to make sure that we can get through this winter without the kinds of disruptions to our lives and to health and safety that we've had over the past number of winters. But we also know Canadians are able and willing to step up to keep each other safe, to do the right thing. And right now, the best and easiest thing we can do is make sure that we get those boosters, make sure you're up to date in your vaccinations.
And on another topic, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has gone to the police over online threats made against his wife. I'm wondering if you have any comment on this latest example of politically connected attacks.
No one should ever be subject to threats of violence or the kind of hatred that we've seen increasingly in public discourse and in the public sphere. It's important that we all stand up and condemn that, and we all look for ways to ensure that everyone feels safe in this country.
Marc-André Cossette, Global.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. First, on today's announcements regarding dropping border measures, we heard today that the number of cases tied to travel it was described as minor and insignificant, but some might argue that that's precisely because there were travel measures in place. So how were you personally convinced?
We make decisions based on what experts, what doctors, what public health authorities recommend us to do. There is the sense that these border measures were no longer effective or no longer justified in the circumstance that we're in right now. We know that we are seeing a slight uptick in cases in certain places, so we're going to have to be careful and monitor carefully. But at the same time, to remind Canadians, we stepped up during this pandemic as individuals, as communities, to get vaccinated quicker and to higher levels than just about any other country in the world. And because of that, studies have shown that we avoided hundreds of thousands of deaths because of the decisions that municipalities, that provinces, that the federal governments took during this pandemic that kept people safe. And right now, the best thing each of us can do to prevent a resurgence of COVID-19 as winter approaches is to make sure that you get up to date in your vaccinations with the new formulations coming out that'll keep us even safer, and that'll mean that we won't need to take further steps, hopefully, if everyone gets vaccinated.
And for Minister Anand, the Canadian Forces are again being asked to respond to yet another massive natural disaster, the kind that used to be considered a once-in-a-generation or once-in-a-lifetime event. I have no doubt that they'll do a phenomenal job, but the military has often been described as supposed to be the force of last resort in these kinds of instances. So what kind of strain is this putting on the Canadian military? And has the time come for some sort of civilian response team that could, if only to support the military or take over that job so that the military can focus on the other jobs that it has to do?
I want to start by saying that the military and their members of the Canadian Armed Forces are very proud of the work that they're doing, and they jump to the challenge to serve, whether it's nationally or internationally. And so in this particular crisis as well, we've seen no hesitation from the Canadian Armed Forces to step up once again for our country. In terms of resources, of course, we need to continue to build resources, especially in the area of personnel, so that in the long term, as we see these climate-related disasters hitting our country, the resources are there in the Canadian Armed Forces to continue to assist as we want to do. At the same time, we will continue to partner with local organizations, with provincial governments, to ensure that the all-hands-on-deck effort that you're witnessing now and that will continue regardless of the time and place that these disasters occur will continue to be sustainable. There will always be a need to invest in the Canadian Armed Forces, and that's why this government has continued to do that with, for example, an $8 billion investment in the Canadian Armed Forces in Budget 2022. It's a priority for our government, it's a priority for me, and the Canadian Armed Forces will, I am sure, continue to be well served by this government in this country in its time of need, especially. Thank you.
So it seems that we have time for one more question. There's two people in the room that would like a question, so maybe go ahead.
Oui, alors peut-être expliquer en français quand est-ce que vous
Perhaps you can explain in French, Mr. Trudeau, when you will be going to the devastated areas, and tell us exactly what you're doing for the people who are becoming concerned with regard to insurance companies which might not compensate them. What will the government do to help? As soon as possible in the coming days. For Canadian devastated areas affected by Hurricane Fiona. There's work to be done in the coming days, weeks, and who knows, years to come, and the federal government will be there.
Hi. Prime Minister, this morning we heard the ministers talk about this challenge around, dropping the mask mandates and all the other mandates in terms of the impact on airline workers, healthcare workers, and all of that. So could you talk a bit about your thinking around the political challenge of maintaining some public buy-in to all kinds of measures? And if you could also talk about how hard do you foresee it might be to reimpose measures should things get worse?
First of all, I think Canadians learned a lot about themselves and about their communities over these past couple of years. We learned that we are there to step up for each other, that we are there to follow the best advice that our doctors, that our public health experts give. People wore masks. People kept their distances. People were there for their neighbors. People did the kinds of things that in getting vaccinated to a higher degree than most Western countries, people knew what the right things were to do, and people will continue to do those. We just know that allowing people to make their own choices on whether they're how they're feeling, whether they're at risk, what they're choosing to do to keep safe. We still, obviously, are going to see public health authorities and local authorities make recommendations on the best choices people can make to stay safe, and it'll be important that people do that. But the biggest thing people can do is do what we did during the first waves of the pandemic when Canadians went out and got vaccinated. That is one of the reasons why Canada has seen less of an impact of COVID-19 in terms of deaths, in terms of economic loss and damage as well, than many other countries. Canadians did that. People chose to go out and do the right thing and get their vaccinations. So now, this fall, as people are looking at getting their flu shots, people also need to think about getting up to date in their COVID boosters so that we can make it through this winter with as minimal disruption to our healthcare systems, to our economic functioning, but also to the health and safety of Canadians.
But you decided against a coercive approach. I'm trying to understand that.
Right now, the numbers and the recommendations of experts clearly said that the border measures are no longer necessary and travel measures are no longer necessary. As the situation changes, we will continue to monitor closely. But I can say that the more Canadians choose to get vaccinated, the more people get up to date in their shots, the more resilient we will be as a country to any future waves of COVID, and therefore the less disruption people will have to see in their lives. C'est très clair que les Canadiens savent.
It's clear that Canadians know what to do. They've shown this. People have kept a safe distance. They wore their masks. They got vaccinated at a rate higher than in many other countries. And that's why hundreds of thousands of deaths did not occur in Canada. There was less economic impact in Canada than elsewhere in the world. So with fall around the corner, we are keeping a close eye on the situation, but public health experts have told us clearly that border measures, travel measures are not necessary anymore. And clearly, local health authorities will keep on making recommendations for people to engage in safe behaviors to keep them safe. And the best thing we can do, each of us, is to make sure that we get our vaccinations up to date to minimize any potential future waves coming up in the winter. And local health authorities in various jurisdictions might put out new directives if there are future serious COVID waves. Thank you.
Recording stopped.